Have you ever heard of a man who could conquer the world without a single soldier? A man who turned rivals into allies and chaos into order, all with a brilliant mind and a hidden plan? This is the story of TV, a strategist whose name was once synonymous with genius, then with betrayal, and finally with a legend that reshaped history. Imagine this, TVM, at the peak of his career, a master strategist whose every move was celebrated. But in the shadowy courts of power, his brilliance bred jealousy. A carefully woven web of lies ensnared him. Falsely accused of treason, he was stripped of his titles, his reputation, his entire life. Everything he had built was torn down in an instant. He lost it all, forced into exile, a ghost disappearing into the fringes of the world he once commanded. But as he vanished, he made a silent vow. He wasn't just going to clear his name, he was going to rebuild the world itself, creating a new order free from the corruption that had cast him out. Most people would have been consumed by bitterness, by a desire for simple revenge. But TVM was different. His exile wasn't an end. It was a preparation. Found refuge in a secluded valley, a place far from the prying eyes of the world. While others saw a disgraced man hiding in shame, he was actually building his new empire, an empire of knowledge. His days were filled not with despair, but with purpose. He meticulously gathered information, poring over maps, economic reports, and political intelligence from across the lands. He studied the intricate dance of power between nations, identifying their strengths, their leaders' ambitions, and most importantly, their hidden weaknesses. He saw the world as a grand chessboard, and from his humble hideaway, he analyzed every piece, understood the rivalry simmering between three powerful neighboring kingdoms. He saw how their mutual suspicion and pride made them predictable, like pawns ready to be moved. He wasn't just watching, he was waiting. He knew that revenge fueled by anger is clumsy and fleeting. True power, he believed, came from patience and precision. He was a predator in the shadows, observing the herd, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, not with a sword but with an idea. His years in seclusion weren't a retreat, they were a strategic advance, sharpening his mind into the most formidable weapon the world had ever known. Then, the moment arrived. The international climate was a tinderbox, with the three neighboring kingdoms posturing. Their armies amassed at the borders, ready for a war that would engulf the region in flames and bloodshed. It was the chaos he had been waiting for. From the shadows, TVM initiated his grand strategy, a plan he called rebuilding the chessboard. He didn't need an army, a banner, or a title. All he needed were whispers, rumors, and carefully planted pieces of information. He began by anonymously leaking intelligence to one kingdom, revealing a supposed secret alliance between the other two. At the same time, he sent fabricated diplomatic messages to the second kingdom, suggesting the first was planning a surprise attack. To the third, he provided evidence of economic sabotage orchestrated by its rivals. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Each piece of information was just plausible enough to stoke the fires of paranoia that already existed. The kings, blinded by their own ambition and distrust, took the bait. They began turning on each other, not on the battlefield, but in the arenas of diplomacy and trade. Alliances frayed, treaties were broken, and the three great powers became entangled in a web of their own making, just as TVM had designed. He had effectively set the world on fire without striking a single match. He turned their strengths against them, using their own armies and treasuries to weaken each other. All while he remained an unseen puppet master, pulling the strings from his quiet retreat. The world was descending into chaos, but for TV, it was the perfect storm. As the kingdoms teetered on the brink of mutual destruction, their economies crumbling and their people suffering, TV made his next move. Just when desperation was at its peak, a mysterious proposal began to circulate among the warring courts. It was a radical idea, a solution so unexpected that it stopped everyone in their tracks. The plan was called using chaos to establish order. It didn't call for surrender or treaties. It called for something far more revolutionary: shared prosperity. The anonymous author TVM, of course, proposed the creation of joint trade posts along their disputed borders. These were not just markets, they were neutral zones of cooperation. The core idea was simple but brilliant. Instead of fighting over land, why not profit from it together? The proposal detailed how these trade posts would be managed by a neutral council, with all three kingdoms sharing the profits based on their investment and participation. At first, the kings were skeptical. Trust was a currency they no longer had. But TVM's plan was meticulously crafted. It included phased rollouts, transparent accounting systems, and guarantees that ensured no single kingdom could dominate the others. Faced with economic ruin and the endless cost of war, the leaders saw a glimmer of hope. It was a lifeline. Reluctantly, they agreed to a trial. The first trade post was built, and it worked. Profits flowed, and for the first time in years, merchants from the rival kingdoms traded goods instead of insults. The people saw immediate benefits. Food became more available, work reappeared, and the constant fear of war began to fade. The success of the first trade post created a ripple effect. Soon, more were built. The economic ties between the nations grew stronger, weaving a tapestry of mutual interest that was far more durable than any peace treaty signed on paper. The kings, who once sought glory and conquest, now found greater power and wealth in cooperation. They began to realize that a prosperous neighbor was a valuable customer, not a threat. The armies that once stood ready for battle were gradually redirected to protect the trade routes that now fueled their kingdoms. Recovery TVM hadn't just stopped a war, it fundamentally changed the very definition of victory, showed the world that true, lasting power wasn't found in dominating others, but in building a system where everyone had a reason to maintain the peace. He used the chaos he created to forge a new, unshakable order. With peace restored and a new era of prosperity dawning, the leaders of the kingdoms desperately sought the architect of this miracle. They eventually traced the brilliant strategy back to the disgraced exile TVMA. The very man they had cast out had saved them all. They came to him, humbled, offering him titles, riches, and the highest positions of power in their newly allied courts. They wanted to make him a prime minister, a grand vizier, anything he wanted. They saw him as the key to securing their future. But TVM, to their astonishment, refused every offer. He had no interest in titles or a seat at the table he had built. His goal was never to rule. It was to create a system that could rule itself, guided by logic and mutual benefit rather than the whims of powerful men. He met with the leaders one last time and shared his final piece of wisdom. The greatest strategist, he told them, knows not only how to play the game, but when to walk away from the chessboard. He explained that his continued presence would only create a new dependency, a new single point of failure. The system he designed was meant to outlast him. His true victory, he said, wasn't conquering kingdoms, but conquering his own desire for power and recognition. And with that, TVM vanished once more. He didn't ride off as a celebrated hero, but slipped away quietly, leaving behind a stable, peaceful world and a philosophy for the ages. His legacy wasn't a statue in a town square, but a lasting peace and the profound lesson that sometimes the most powerful move is to let go. The story of TVIM teaches us so much. It's a reminder that true strength isn't about the power you hold over others, but the control you have over yourself. It shows that even from the lowest point of failure, a brilliant mind with patience can change the world. His strategies, rebuilding the chessboard and using chaos to establish order, are more than just tales from history. They are timeless lessons in strategy, psychology, and leadership. He proved that you do and need an army to win a war, and that the best way to defeat an enemy is to make them a friend. His ultimate act of walking away teaches us about the temptations of power and the wisdom of knowing when your work is done. So what do you think? Is TVM a hero, a master manipulator, or something else entirely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into strategy and history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories about the hidden schemes that shaped our world. See you next time.